Welcome to the Australian Zeitgeist Movement podcast, where ideas are critically examined and solutions are explored.
Founded in 2008, the Zeitgeist Movement is a sustainability organisation which conducts community-based activism and awareness actions through a network of global and regional chapters, project teams, annual events, media and charity work.
The movement's principal focus includes the recognition that the majority of the social problems that plague the human species at this time are not the sole result of some institutional corruption, absolute scarcity, a political policy, a flaw of human nature, or any other commonly held assumptions. Rather, the movement recognizes that issues such as poverty, corruption, pollution, homelessness, war, starvation, and the like appear to be symptoms born out of an outdated social structure.
While community support is of interest to the movement, the defining goal is a new socio-economic model based upon responsible resource management using the scientific method. We call this a natural law resource-based economy, or NLRBE, and NLRBE is about taking a direct technical approach to social management as opposed to using money. It is about updating society to the most advanced methods known, leaving behind the damaging consequences generated by our current system of monetary exchange, profit, business, and other structural and motivational issues.
The movement is loyal to a train of thought, not figures or institutions. The view held is that through the use of research and tested understandings in science and technology, we are now able to logically arrive at conclusions that could be profoundly more effective in meeting the needs of the human population.
There is little reason to assume war, poverty, most crime, and many other monetarily based scarcity effects common in our current model cannot be resolved over time. The range of the movement's activism and awareness campaigns extend from short to long term, with methods based explicitly on non-violent methods of communication.
The Zeitgeist Movement has no allegiance to any country or traditional political platform. It views the world as a single system and the human species as a single family, and recognizes that all countries must disarm and learn to share resources and ideas if we expect to survive in the long run. Hence, the solutions arrived at and promoted are in the interest to help everyone on Earth, not a select group. The views expressed on this podcast are not necessarily shared by the Zeitgeist Movement train of thought, but are the responsibility of the individuals stating them.
Enjoy the show.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Zeitgeist Movement podcast. My name's Zac, and I'm here with my friend
Michael.
Michael, what got you into Zeitgeist initially?
Lots of things actually. It wasn't just one thing. Predominantly the first, I really like documentaries, and the first documentary that put me on that path was a documentary called Wars, which is...
I haven't even seen that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting documentary, and there is a follow-up documentary afterwards as well, called Human Resources. And I watched those two, and to be quite honest, they're quite upfront with the truth, and there's quite a lot of disturbing material in those documentaries.
Okay, so for me who hasn't seen them and the audience who may not have seen them either, can you fill us in on what they're about?
Basically, it's the history of psychological operations where the US government or the US military or the British government or military, as the case may be, would go in order to destabilize an area so that they can go in and invade and then take their resources.
Divide and conquer.
Yes, yeah. That's and so they're called psyops, and they have evidence of this in Iraq and in Afghanistan. They have evidence of this in Syria. They have evidence of this in Pakistan and Iran and all that sort of thing. And a lot of these events that happened were literally staged by the CIA. There's a guy on there who was a psychological operator.
So you're referring to people like John Perkins, the economic hitman?
Yeah, he was actually in there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's one of the ones that go in there. There's 3 teams, and he was part of the first wave, which would go in and try and negotiate and try and get some sort of deal and threaten, as the case may be, if they weren't going to accept the deal.
So what were the 3 waves of...
3 waves were the economic hitman, right? And then if that failed, then they would go in with psyops to try and destabilize the area and try and get whoever person removed from power, and then replace them with someone more
Favourable to Western values.
That's right.
Like democracy and capitalism.
If that and they were called the jackals.
Yeah.
They would send the jackals in. That was what that meant. And the third wave was that if the first two failed, then it would just be straight up war invasion.
Which actually happened quite a lot in the 20th century with America.
Oh, yes.
Invading various countries.
America has made a lot of mistakes when it comes to psyops. Quite a lot. A lot of the groups that they funded ended up retaliating. A lot of, this is, Saddam Hussein all over again. The US CIA funded Saddam Hussein for quite a few years, even trained him and that sort of thing, and until he decided he wasn't going to go their way anymore. And this happens quite a lot. There's a very strategic techniques that they use to try and make sure that doesn't happen and try and kill off members that...
Don't toe the line, yeah. So, who else didn't cooperate, do you think?
The one that I know about that's highlighted in the documentary is Saddam Hussein.
Okay.
There are others that they allude to, but I don't have the evidence for that.
Fair enough.
Very interesting set of documentaries. And I got particularly, worried and concerned about the welfare of the planet or the human race, and with these sorts of governmental powers being enacted. So I just, spent quite a few years just having documentary sessions all over the shop until I eventually came across the Zeitgeist movie, which really astounded me. It was the first documentary that wasn't just all doom and gloom for me. It actually had prospect of hope and something that we could do. Yeah.
That tends to be what I identify with in the Zeitgeist movement as well, is it's not just focusing on the problem, it's saying this is the problem, and it's very candid and clear about what the problem is.
Yeah.
But then it's also saying, because that's what the problem, here's how we can fix that kind of problem. And because it's a systemic problem, we need to change the system. And because there's this, that, and the other, we need to change this, that, and the other.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I quite like the first Zeitgeist movie. It was far more positive than a lot of the documentaries that I had been seeing at the time. Mm-hmm. And it got me excited and interested in doing something about it.
And what have you been doing?
Oh, lots of things. I've joined protests, so, did the whole Occupy thing. I have some connections with anonymous people, so I keep my finger on the pulse when it comes to that. I write, I read and edit blogs sometimes.
You do this podcast?
I do this podcast, yeah, sure. I'll put that on the list.
So, you mentioned Occupy. What is Occupy?
I feel it was a result of a systemic problem between income disparity and, in particular, government power being so powerful that the poor literally have no voice.
That's where the 99%
the 99% and 1% comes from. Well, it comes from the idea when Occupy happened, the 1% owned more than 50% of all the wealth than the rest of the population combined. That's the time at which Occupy started, and I think that would have been a driving factor on why people were so angry at the time. And
social inequality generally has negative effects on a society.
Yeah. And now it's actually gotten worse. Now it's the top 0.1% owns 65% of all the wealth of the planet. Like, that's crazy. It's even worse now. So
that wouldn't surprise me if that was true. How the social inequality occurs is as a result of the systemic problem of the money market system itself. Because the more money you have, the more money you make.
I like to think of it in more simple terms. It's just the nature of competition. If we're going to have a game and a competition to see who wins, then I'm going to use whatever means that I can get away with to do that. Like, it's not a moral judgment call. Right? It's not, I'm going to do this or I'm not going to do that based on what I feel or how I think. Do you know what I mean?
It's whatever succeeds in the game.
That's exactly right. It's whatever succeeds. And if you don't succeed, you're going to fail. You're not going to get that money, right? So,
and you're never going to get to the upper echelons of society.
So I don't even think it's a moral question. The economics of the time doesn't regard moral questions when it does its work. It's not even considered.
And to go back to Saddam Hussein thing you were mentioning earlier, it's just an economic decision for America to assassinate someone if
That's right.
they are not a positive effect on their ledger.
Exactly.
If they're costing them money rather than making them money, and you can get away with it, why wouldn't you just have them assassinated?
And that's
it's a
how
fairly logical, cold decision, but it's a reality.
And that's exactly how the US government justifies it too. They deem it as what's in US interest. They say these terms a lot. What's in the best of US interests, right? All
But when they
US
say
interest
that,
means is money, right? If they can make money from it, well, then it's of US interest.
but money for who?
Yeah, exactly. If they can't make money of it, the US won't touch it, right?
But it's not making money for the whole of United States, 320 million people.
No,
it's
obviously.
making money for the select few that are actually pulling the strings.
The only way that it would be for the whole of the US population was if there was socialism there, but there is none. As far as the US is concerned, everything is legal. Everything is sanctioned. Going in and invading Iraq and Iran and anywhere else is sanctioned because it's in the US interest.
It's a hostile corporate takeover.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what they classify it as. When they send people to war, I don't think they really know what war is. I don't think they know...
You mean the people going?
No, the people sending.
Oh.
I don't think they actually have experience being poor.
Well, that class of people probably hasn't.
Yeah, I don't think they've experienced having to be forced to sign up in a list in order to make money. I don't think that they've been forced into going to a war that they don't agree with. And I don't think that they've died and had other people around them die in that pursuit.
Well, that class of people is generally the people ordering the soldiers to go die. And the poorer people are generally the soldiers who go and die.
Well, Michael Moore did a very funny thing in one of his documentaries that I just found was just insanely hilarious, but really pointed as well. He would sit outside of Congress and he would ask congressmen if he would send their daughters and sons off to Iraq. We're
no, the senators that actually voted for the war to see if they're actually consistent with their views, which
exactly.
they were unanimously
no. That it was no one even entertained, like no one even stopped for a second to entertain the idea.
He's like, I've got some brochures here.
No, not even going to read the brochure. Not even going to take your brochures. Nah.
Because they know.
I think
it's cognitive dissonance again.
Yeah, I think it is cognitive
They're
dissonance.
for the war, but not for their kids.
I think they know what they're doing. I don't think they're aware of the ramifications of what they're doing, and that's the difference.
And that is a trait that is throughout a lot of society.
Yeah.
That you kind of agree with something, but you don't necessarily know the ramifications of what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, that's what started me on this whole journey.
How long's it been so far?
6-7 years.
Okay.
But, yeah, Zeitgeist, when it first came out, that was just a breakthrough movie. That just tore the internet up. Like, if you were on the internet at that time, you would have seen it. Easy.
So earlier you mentioned America being capitalist, but if it was socialist, I kind of disagree with that point. I think capitalism and socialism and communism are all still within the money market system, so there's no fundamental difference. What do you think about that idea?
I generally agree with you.
Okay.
I don't like the idea of money at all. I think money corrupts everything.
How so?
Well, like I just said, if you're doing everything, your survival, your life choices and your lifestyle, your kids, your family and your friends are all dependent on what you choose, right? And what you choose determines how much money you get, or none at all, right? And that is your very survival. And I just think, personally, I think that is immoral to impose such a system on someone. I think people should be free to do whatever they want. If government regulation, because the fact that private property exists and everything is pretty much
And you really
owned.
can't survive in modern society without money.
No. That's the only lifeblood that you've got left. It
So
really is the be-all and end-all of everything.
That tends to become people's number one priority, and then morals and so on become number
secondary.
2. And then you're always needing money, you never have enough.
That's
so
right.
your morals get pushed to the side.
See, I don't think this idea that people have that, these head honcho guys are in the, a dark room hatching their plan to impose on the poor. I don't think that happens. I think
it's not necessary.
It's not necessary because that happens naturally and intrinsically through competition, right? When we're forced to compete with one another to survive,
and they're mostly business decisions.
You're going to do what
anyway.
it takes.
Yeah, it's business decisions.
Yeah.
It's just good business to be competitive and brutal and corrupt.
Exactly.
And immoral.
It's good business to do planned obsolescence on your light bulbs, right? It's good business.
Because you make more money.
This isn't a moral question. There was a guy who was the CEO of a major carpet manufacturer, international carpet manufacturer. He actually went through and worked right at the lower end of his company. Mm-hmm. And worked all the way back up again to see how his company was doing. And the number one thing that horrified him was the way his carpets were made and what they were using to make them. He was showing that his company was wasting a hell of a lot, and the chemicals that they were using were not only toxic to his employees, but toxic to people as well. Like when you took the carpet home and put it down, this was toxic to people as well. So he ended up changing that all around, and he did actually get a huge dip in his revenue in the next few years, trying to clean up his business. When people do the right thing in this society, they get punished. Yeah. And that I just feel is intrinsically wrong.
And you die out as a business if you do something right.
Exactly.
What you're alluding to is externalities. If you can externalize costs and means society or other people pay for part of your production, nature or other people or society at large, and you maximize profits that way, then you'll survive.
And that's
people
exactly
who take responsibility for their actions, business-wise, and don't use as many externalities as they can.
And that's
they're driven
right.
into extinction by the business model.
Economics 101, the first thing they tell you about is externalities. The first thing they teach you about is, what is the responsibility of the company and what isn't, right? These are a list of things that people might have a problem with, but they're all externalities. And they go through one by one and tell you exactly why they're externalities.
And why they're not their responsibility.
Exactly. And half of them affect their own business, affect their employees, affect their revenue, affect the environment around them, affect the amount of resources they can get, and the quality of resources they can get.
Yeah, well, think about every time you buy groceries or you buy food or something that come in a container or there's bags and packaging and everything. The company isn't thinking about, well, when that person's finished with that good, they're going to throw that packaging out and that's going to end up in landfill eventually. They're just thinking about, we've spent the minimum money, it's not recyclable, but we're not going to actually go to the effort to do that because that's not a very good business practice.
No. Well, why would you do that when you can make more money doing less?
Well, the fact is you wouldn't even be able to survive. Like, you wouldn't even get off the ground if you did that.
Yeah. But, they go through, when you learn economics at university, they drill it pretty hard about externalities and the way in which you can word things and the way in which you can think about things in order to make it an externality or make it internal to the business.
Well, you really don't want to internalize costs ever. You always want to pay your employees the minimum possible. You want to pay for your raw materials, you want to pay the least you can. You want to get around the legal regulations as much as you can. You just always doing the minimum because you're minimizing. Yeah. You're minimizing costs and maximizing profit. That's what the system dictates.
So this was highlighted in last week tonight with John Oliver. Before they were talking about the chicken industry, right? Yeah. And so what the big chicken magnates do is that they sell you the chicks, right? They hold all the chickens and they sell you the chicks, right? And you, as a chicken farmer, you get all the externalities, all the things that cost you. You get the setup of the farm and the building. You get the setup of the feed and the medical maintenance sort of stuff for the chickens. You get all of this. Plus, they can come in and tell you, you need this, you need that upgrade, you need this.
And force you to buy those upgrades.
So basically what they're doing is they're externalizing all the costs to the farmer and all the things that actually generate profit, which is the chickens, they own. They get all the profit and the farmers get all the cost. And this is why chicken is the number one most popular food in America, bar none, yet chicken farmers are close to or below the poverty line in every state.
Yeah. It's quite a contradiction, isn't it?
It is. It's huge. That sort of system is intrinsically immoral to me as a person, and it's not even considered in the economic machine.
Well, let's quantify what morals are and what your moral position is. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Well, me personally, I don't get overwhelmed with feeling and emotion a lot. I'm quite scientific.
Okay.
So when people talk about morals, I sort of understand what they're talking about. Me personally, I don't believe morals actually exist. I believe in science, and when it comes to being nice to someone, for example, why would I be nice to someone if I didn't believe in morals? Well, it's out of self-preservation. We're herd mammals. We're supposed to work together. We're supposed to love each other. We're supposed to intermingle and share ideas. This is the way that we're supposed to be. If you impose any sort of negative behavior in that system, well, then the system breaks down. You lose your community, you lose your friends, you lose your family, you lose that connection, you lose the
social
ability.
support.
Yeah. So I think it's out of self-preservation, honestly. Me, relating to you in a polite way is out of self-preservation because I don't want you to retaliate against me. I don't want you to aggress on me. Why would I aggress on you?
So you're saying that competition isn't actually self-preservation, cooperation is?
That's right, yeah.
That kind of comes down to what I was talking about yesterday, is a game theory evolution tit-for-tat cooperation strategy, which developed, as we're evolving.
Yeah.
Is if I cooperate with you and you cooperate back, then I keep cooperating. But if you don't cooperate, then I will not cooperate back and then go back to cooperating eventually, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think that's the way we're supposed to be. I think as human beings, individually, we are all incredibly flawed. There is not one person out there that is the God of all people, right? It just doesn't exist. We have got so many individual, intrinsic flaws within us that by ourselves, we're nothing.
Yeah, we'll die.
Yeah.
There are no lone wolf
No.
humans.
There are none. And it goes right back to what you were talking about with externalities. I don't think nature actually deals with externalities. Everything is connected. Just like human beings are supposed to be connected, we're all supposed to be connected.
Yeah,
the whole environment is supposed to be this mess and web of just interchanging things that are transforming all the time. And we're supposed to mix like that. That's the way nature is intended. So I don't think it's a moral question when people ask me about these things. I don't actually know what they mean by morals. Do you mean morals by what, is written in the Bible, or what religious morals you're given?
Yes, the God-given morals,
do you know
of
what I mean?
course.
Like, those sorts of morals, I easily just pass over. It's not important to me.
So earlier you alluded to human beings relying on each other for bettering their own lives. And I could understand how you could broaden that view and think you need all of nature, not just other humans. So
That's right.
you need to look after not only yourself, but you can look after yourself by looking after all other humans and all other plant and animal life as well.
You see, Zach, I love science. I am the biggest science nerd, but the biggest lie that science has ever told anyone is that we are above nature. We have beaten nature.
Has nature said that?
Well,
has science?
Well, yeah. It basically says is that everything is mechanistic, and if we look hard enough and look, closely enough, then we can see all the little moving bits, and all we are is just biological machines. I just don't think that that's the case. I don't believe that we are a separate species from, say, an antelope or, grass, for example, right? I don't think we're that different. And in fact, science tells you that the DNA is more common than it is different in everything, every living thing.
Yeah, well, you need similar genes to metabolize carbohydrates.
That's right. So
animals will need that.
That being said, I don't believe that we are a collection of species. I actually believe
I think it's a continuum.
One organism.
I would say it's a continuum.
Yeah.
And there are minor differences between you and me, but there are more noticeable differences between, say, me and a pig, and then there's...
Yeah, but you need the pig, and the pig does need the rest of nature. Even if it doesn't need you specifically, it does need the rest of nature. Everything is interconnected.
Yeah.
And while one species might be separate from another species, it doesn't mean that you want that species to be wiped out. And it doesn't mean you can afford to have that species wiped out.
It's kind of like you require all your organs to live.
That's
and you
right.
can't just chop out one organ.
No. You chop out a lung, you're going to have a hard time.
Then
right?
your stomach will stop working because you're not getting any oxygen.
Well, that's exactly right.
So I see where you're going with this. So you're saying everything is really one organism and we're all just different, interconnected, reliant on other parts.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what I believe personally anyway.
That's a fair enough view.
Yeah. I don't really like the idea of God. I don't think that... Because in my mind, if God exists, well, then he's a kid with a magnifying glass, right? He's sitting there just stuffing around and, seeing what happens, right? And I just don't think that is what I would consider a moral sort of God, right?
Yeah, well, I've never really believed in God. I wasn't raised that way. So I think it is something that actually needs to be indoctrinated into you for you to believe. Yeah. Like, if you become 18...
That's why they start early.
18 and you've never heard of religion, it's going to be a lot harder for someone to make you believe.
You try to sell the idea of Christianity to an 18-year-old. Oh, there's a God up in the sky who loves you but will punish you, right, if you do anything wrong, and he's got these 10 commandments. He gives you free will, but then he gives you a set of rules that you can't do, right?
But you can do it, you'll just break them and they'll be mad at you. But
exactly.
he loves
you. It just... it doesn't make any sense. And no 18-year-old who hasn't been already exposed to that sort of thing...
But a 5-year-old will believe it.
But a 5-year-old will believe that. And that's the whole point. That was the whole premise of Sunday. I went to Sunday school every Sunday. I went to church every Sunday.
Oh, wow.
Do you know what I mean? They have to start you early. They have to.
Well, otherwise, that's how you indoctrinate people, and that's why you start school. In my opinion, school is like religion light.
Yeah, I would...
I'm not a big fan of school because I think it indoctrinates you in a certain way of thinking which is not necessarily optimal.
I would generally agree with you, but school is a necessity.
Well, some sort of education is good.
Yes.
But not
the way that we go about it, no.
Yeah.
No. The way that we go about it now, no. It is definitely indoctrination. There was a guy in India, a very well-renowned psychologist, I believe.
Yeah.
And he tried to set up this program called Slot in the Wall, right?
Oh, yes.
So, have you heard about that?
Yes, I have.
He started that, right? And from that, and if you didn't know what Slot in the Wall is that in India he would put up these computers that were set into the wall, and so you would only have a slot in the wall where the keyboard function was, and so you'd have all these kids go to these areas where they would have free computer and free internet, and they would just spend all their time researching stuff. They would swap with each other. They would learn about it and talk with each other about it. And he saw this and said, okay, well, what can we do other than this? So he started doing experiments on school kids. I know that sounds bad, but on school kids. So what he would do is put 4 children in a room with one computer. And he would say, okay, you have to take turns, right? You've got 15 minutes, you've got 15 minutes, you've got 15 minutes. You take a round robin, and you can look up whatever you want. You can research whatever you want. The only requirement is that at the end of your 15 minutes, you discuss it with everyone first, and then you go on to the next one. From this result, he had skyrocketed their test results by 50%. Like, it was unbelievable. And it was completely unstructured, no teacher, no curriculum. It was completely unstructured time. They were learning themselves, and they were learning because they wanted to learn.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for self-guided learning as well. That's how I mostly learn. That's not surprising if that was true, because I think the way that school is at the moment encourages you to be disconnected, just to go into your own world and get bored and doodle on your paper, and it's working at a pace that you're not wanting, and you're at a place where you don't want to be.
Exactly.
And you're rigid in a desk looking at the board. It's just not very
the way we've structured it is very problematic, I feel. And I totally agree with you. I am a fast learner, and as a fast learner, as most people who are fast learners will know, you finish your work first and then you annoy everyone else. You become quite disruptive as a student. You're not a very good student.
And then you get labelled with ADHD.
Yeah. So, and that happens a lot. And then you've got the kids, friends of mine, for example, that were far slower than other people learning. Like, they will learn, and once they learn, they've learnt it. It sticks, right? But it just takes them longer. They just need more experience with it. In a class environment where you've got a set curriculum at a set time scale, and then you've got standardized tests thrown between, teachers' pay is dependent on those tests. Do you know what I mean?
So what incentive do they have?
Well, to
inflate the results, right?
They do inflate the results, and this is how they used to do it in the US, right? They got caught, but this is how they used to do it in the US. Teachers would give a certain amount of time for the standardized test, and they would know that there would be not enough time to answer every question in that test anyway. So this is what usually happened. The dumb people, or the slow people, whatever the case may be, would answer about half of the test and then stop. They would have run out of time. So the teachers would then go in at the end of the day and start answering some of the last questions, the hardest questions, the ones that were worth the most points. And they would just get one or two right, and that would bring up their score immeasurably and get them the passing grade.
Not surprising. I mean, it's just, again, money market economics. If you benefit personally in the form of more money from an action, then the moral question is kind of pushed to the side and you do what is necessitated.
Exactly. And this is where thievery and corruption and abuse of power and all these sorts of things come from. In my personal view anyway, is the idea of money, is the idea of owning everything is what causes that.
What are your thoughts on the concept of ownership?
I don't think anything can be owned. Personally, I do not believe that anything can be owned other than your own thoughts. Really, your life is dependent on other people's lives and vice versa, and your life is also dependent on nature, and is also dependent on the resources of the planet, and also dependent on the planet being in a specific position that it's in, and, everything is all dependent. How can you go, oh, I own this thing here? I just don't get it.
It is unique to humans, isn't it?
It is.
It's a very strange concept.
It's
one that's very ingrained in us, that ownership is something that most people never even question. It's a hard thing to question because it seems very...
I don't think a rabbit or a tiger or any of the animal kingdom actually thinks of ownership. I don't even think they know the concept, right?
Yeah, I don't think so either.
That being said, animals, like humans, do get upset when you take stuff away from them, right? And so I think that has given rise to the idea of our ownership, our property rights, is because no one likes things being taken away from them. And so to protect oneself, you have to protect your property. In order to have property, in order to protect your property, you have to actually have property, right? So,
and then you have to have laws and government to come and protect that private property.
That's right. So if we were dumb animals again, say we were dumb apes again, I don't think ownership would come into it. I think we would drink from the river and we would eat, from the fields, and no one would care, no one would bat an eye, no one would be talking about corruption and abuse of power.
So you think corruption and ownership and abuse of power are synonymous with intelligence? Is that what you're saying?
I actually do. I actually think humans are smarter than they should be.
Right.
I think evolutionary, our brains were somewhat of a experiment, maybe a mutation that's gone wrong. I don't know. When it comes to intelligence, you get anxiety, you get fear, you get depression, you get a sense of entitlement, you get all these mental disorders purely from the fact that you can overthink things.
Yeah. Well, humans can perceive the future and emotionally react to it in the moment before it actually happens.
That's right. Nothing's happened. Yet their emotional state, it's already happened.
Yeah. Stress.
Yeah.
Psychosocial stress.
And I think that comes from an overabundance of intelligence. I personally believe, yes.
I would say that intelligence is generally beneficial, But I think we're in a certain stage of evolution, and capitalism and the money market system is just a stage, and it's probably the last, or one of the last stages we have before we mutate again. And we
hope it's the last
I hope,
stage.
because, yes, there is a chance, obviously, that we go extinct, that we kill ourselves off. But if we survive, if we don't just become an evolutionary dead end...
I would generally agree with you, yeah. I do believe that there is something better and more for the human species than this, and we need to break through that barrier in order to get there.
Because we could use our intelligence, which is just a tool, for good or evil. We could use it to build a better society for everyone and everything, or to kill ourselves.
Exactly. And that's the sort of quandary that we're left with in this society at the moment. We've got two choices. We've got sheer annihilation, and with that, the possible annihilation of the planet and the ecosystem as well. Or...
But we could be nice and just kill ourselves and probably everything else would survive.
Well,
but there's a chance that we take everyone else down with us. Or we could just survive and stop destroying the
we could actually do some practices and use our overabundance of intelligence for some sort of common good, right? We could do that. We can use this genetic mutation to our advantage, like we have before. This is what makes us human. This is what makes us unique in the animal kingdom. Let's start using it for the right reasons.
What do you think those reasons are?
The betterment of everything. That means the betterment of your life and the human species' life and the animal kingdom's life and the plant kingdom's life and the aliens' life, right? It's all interconnected.
Okay. So it's very collectivist in your view, not individualistic.
I don't believe separation exists.
Okay.
I don't think that it can exist, and when we try to force it, which we do all the time as humans, we end up stuffing it up.
Well, it comes back to what we were talking about earlier about humans not being able to survive on their own. Like, think about all the production that has gone into everything you have at the moment. I didn't want to say own, so I'll say have. But like all the clothes you wear, this laptop, a pencil, how long would it take to make all that yourself? And you'd need so many skills because there's so many stages of production.
Technology and science, like I said at the start, I love it. I can't get enough of it. I'm addicted to it. I could not survive without it. Could not survive. And this is the whole point. Like, you're right. If I was to make my own clothes and cook my own food and, clean up everything after myself, and I would have no time for work. Let's just put it that way.
Or imagination.
I would have no free time. Like, the idea of manufacturing is a great idea. The idea of manufacturing for the sake of manufacturing, that's a horrible idea.
You use technology or manufacturing as a tool to free you from doing it yourself, which would take more effort and man hours and so on. If you can use a machine that can half the time, let's say a shovel to dig a hole rather than your hands, that is the first stage of technology, and then so on and so forth. Now you have a robot that can dig a hole better than you could ever imagine to, and then it frees you from these manual tasks.
Probably dig you 2,600 holes, all perfectly aligned, all perfectly cut in the same time that you dug one, right?
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm alluding to, is that it frees you from physical labor, and it could do it better than you could anyway.
Exactly. And this is how I feel. I feel technology is supposed to remove us from drudgery. And I do actually mean the word drudgery. Back in caveman times, everything was an ordeal, everything was scarce, everything was hard to make, everything was hard to do, everything was just eking that little bit much closer every day, and largely it was all
you get up with no food, and you have to find the food for that day.
Yeah.
Or you'll go hungry.
Exactly. So it was a very hard time, and that's all the time was consumed with. It was feeding yourself, clothing yourself, sheltering yourself. That was all that was necessary.
So, Michael, if we're not going to spend all this time doing this drudgery, what are we going to do all day?
Well, we have an overabundance of intelligence, like I alluded to. I think we were destined to create.
Create what?
Anything. I believe that we were supposed to create a sustainable system that actually removes us from adversely
affecting our health,
the environment, for example, or the planet.
Yeah.
Which we've still not done.
Yeah.
Which we still could have done like many decades ago.
We seem to be in the early stages.
Yeah, we're still in the early stages, and it's already past the tipping point, apparently, with global warming. Apparently it's already over. Like, we're going to have to do something more drastic now. We can't just recycle and clean up our waste. We're going to have to do something else now in order to reverse global warming. So
you're saying it's over, we shouldn't even try.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying give up, it's all over, just take what you can get, and just...
Well, if you believe, as you said earlier, that you believe that you and I are not separated, that you and other animals and the rest of life aren't separated, then when you're dead, you're not necessarily really dead.
No.
So your connection to the universe will be eternal? Is that what you're alluding to?
Well, yeah, personally, I believe in this one thing, and there have been many things that have added to that over the years, but I do believe in this one premise that is just for me, myself. This guy came up with the concept that there is a soul, right? That the soul gives us consciousness, is what makes us alive, what makes us beings, right?
But does that mean the soul is gone once you're dead?
No. What he said is that, but the soul isn't what you think it is, and it does not reside in you. The soul is everything. The soul is the universe. And the universe has chosen to put a bit of it in you, right? As a human. Or a bit of it in an animal, or a bit of it in a plant, for example. Do you know what I mean? And that we're all the same being going through different experiences through life.
Well, in terms of science, we're all made of the same stuff. Like humans are made of the same stuff that animals are, that are made from the earth and the stars. So we are on that level, all the same stuff.
Yes. And it is interesting to note that, and someone else had said this as well, that you've got to consider that there was a time where the greatest minds of our history, say Archimedes, say, Galileo, say, Newton, they would have drunk the same water that you are drinking right now. The water that you're drinking now, there are atoms in there that have literally passed through those bodies at the time that they were great people, right? And I think that's I think it's quite a good metaphor for what I believe. I think the soul is in everything. I don't think to me, the universe does not make sense unless there is some higher purpose. But I don't believe in God. So...
Well, strangely, that actually sounds consistent to me. So I'm not going to pull you up on that. So what you said before about the water and everything, so for people who don't know what the hell we're talking about, there's a finite amount of water in the world, and if it's randomly circulated through oceans and rain and clouds and so on, and you drink a little bit, and that will get redispersed into the environment, other people drink it. It's the same atoms.
That's right. That's exactly right. Aborigines believe that life is a fleeting moment, a capture, if you will, of what this existence on this planet in this specific space and time is like, right? And once you're dead, you go back home, right? Your soul goes back home. And that's where your home is. That's, different to different people. Even different Aboriginal clans have different meanings. But it's basically, from what I gather, it's the ether.
Well, right? I'll ask your opinion. Do you believe in an afterlife? Because that seems to be what you're saying.
I like the idea of reincarnation. I believe that people have a soul. That is the extent at where I believe. That's it.
But since there's no physical evidence and you seem to be such a science guru, how could
There is a lot of scientific evidence for the soul, actually.
Okay, so well, why don't you explain that? Because what I was going to say is, how can that seems quite inconsistent to believe in an afterlife and a soul and yet endorse technology and science?
I am curious by nature, and I will absorb literally anything that I read or see and figure it out and play little role plays in my head and little scenarios out of my head and see how it works. I don't remember being born, and I can't imagine being dead, and I get that, when you're born, you don't really have the cognitive powers to be able to be aware of your surroundings as such.
Can I ask you one more question? Just before we go on, do you think consciousness comes from the brain?
No.
So what do you think? Where do you think it comes from?
If it came from the brain, then I would have to believe that everything is just a biological machine and nothing more.
And you don't think it is?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I think we're all connected. There are certain things that cannot be explained through science. Metaphysics is one, right? Quantum mechanics is another. And these...
But is that our lack of knowledge at this point of time?
It is our lack of knowledge, but there are evidence around us that, a soul does exist. For example, twins who have been separated at birth, separate sides of the earth, can have real connections and real psychic connections. And that becomes problematic on how to figure that out. You would have to then think, well, the brain must be some transmitter that is so powerful it can go across the planet, or there is some sort of other connection that we cannot see.
Well, I'm sure there are other explanations possible.
Hard to imagine. There are experiments that were done by this doctor where he would strap what he calls the God cap onto you, right? So he's got
Which doctor?
I can't remember. Anyway, he does these experiments where he straps a series of magnets onto this cap, and you put the cap on, and these magnets turn on and off at different times. And he's found a specific frequency that if he just plays this frequency over and over and over again, you will talk to God. Not you might, you will talk to God. You will have an experience where you see God and where you talk to God, or what you believe is God. These sorts of things can't really be explained from a biological machine point of view.
Well, that is an interesting point. So, I guess what you're talking about is psychedelic drugs, which are just molecules of carbon and hydrogen and oxygen, a few other things generally.
Yep.
And yet they have these crazy profound effects on the human mind, where humans experience generally the same kind of symptoms, I might say, of these drugs.
Yeah.
And they tend to be of euphoria and seeing things that they believe at the time are real, hallucinations and so on. What do you think about that? How can a molecule create this other world, or what is perceived to be an other world in the person's mind?
To me, it's kind of easy. There are specific strings of molecules that if you arrange them in a specific way, they affect you in a very positive way. You arrange the exact same chemical in a slightly different array, and it can kill you. It depends on how things are connected and how you are when you're connecting to it, right?
But isn't this more evidence of the world actually being just lots of biological machines? Isn't our brain just a biological machine with a lock and a key, and I
can't tell you that that's not the case. That is one of the options. I don't want that to be the option.
Okay, that's a fair... I'll give you props for that, because what you're saying is, I agree with you, but I don't necessarily believe that, and that's fair enough.
Yes. Because, I like the idea of having a soul. Maybe it's because I was raised Roman Catholic, strictly Roman Catholic. That was drilled into me when I was very young.
So you're biased.
Everyone's biased. Yeah, everyone's biased. And this is what I'm saying. This is what I believe, but I'm open to hearing other people's.
Well, I'm biased because I don't believe in a soul or an afterlife or anything, and I wasn't raised Catholic or Christian or anything, so...
What makes you do good things, for example?
Makes me feel good inside.
Yeah, but why? Why does it make you feel good? It makes everyone feel good.
I think it's a game theory, gaming strategy of finer human interactions and getting positive feedback from other people shows that you're doing...
See, I think that's just sad. I really do.
I'm trying to give the biological explanation.
Yeah. And I think that, it's kind of depressing to think of it that way, because it means that, then that's all there is, and then really nothing matters.
Why is that sad, though?
Well, because nothing matters.
Yeah.
If you are a murderer, or if you're a saint, it doesn't matter, right? So...
Who's to say it does matter, though?
I believe it matters.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it should matter.
I think it matters, too. I'm making a straw man argument here. My point is... the relativism of looking at, it's within our culture, looking at different people and idolizing or not.
Yeah.
So the behavior that we have today that we deem as good or bad is relative to the society it's in.
Exactly. For example, if you were born in one of those, islands that were cannibals, for example, you wouldn't bat an eyelid at eating another human flesh. It wouldn't even... It wouldn't gross you out. You wouldn't even acknowledge it.
And you can be a drone operator today and kill thousands of people a day with your mechanical drone that shoots missiles, and you wouldn't bat an eyelid because you don't really think about it.
Yeah, I get that, and that's a plausible
Explanation,
that's right, but it does make me depressed. I
still think people on some level need to take responsibility for their actions if they're hurting others.
I actually believe that we're all good people, by the way. I
think
actually,
that is the default position, and you have to do something to someone to make them bad.
That's right, and I actually also think that you actually have to do something to bring you back into alignment.
Yeah.
Prison, for example, death penalty and that sort of thing, for example, just does not do that. And
What, you're not a fan of prisons?
No. No, I'm not a fan of prison.
Oh, well, you're going to have to explain that.
Well, if one human being is not free, then you are not free.
That's a good point. Yeah, or the idea, like behind the death penalty, you murdered someone, so we're going to kill you.
Yeah.
That seems quite...
Yeah, well, it's an eye for eye. Like, well, you're just dirtying yourself up along with this guy, right?
No, but they take the high moral ground. That's the thing that's really disgusting.
Yeah. And they say it's not a crime then. It's not something that, I have to wash my hands of, right? It's nothing because I've got the higher ground. I've got the moral...
But what tends to happen is people don't want to do that. People don't want to be responsible for the death of someone else.
No.
Even if they, abstractly agree with the idea.
Not even the guy injecting the death row inmate thinks that he's the one killing him.
Yeah, well, because he might say, oh, it was the judge, and then the judge thinks, oh, it's the guy injecting.
Yeah.
It's just like people in the military, because I have a big problem with military, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And the generals who order men into battle to kill other people, they justify it, I think, abstractly, maybe subconsciously, that, well, I'm just giving them the orders, they don't have to follow, it's not my responsibility if they kill other people. And then the soldiers are saying, well, I'm just taking orders, it's not my responsibility, if I'm not going to do it, someone else will be, and I don't want to be court-martialed for not taking orders.
Precisely, and this is how Nazism worked, right?
Well, all other military, really.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying that is the example. We saw Nazism through a microscope, and everyone understands how wrong that was, and everyone understands how it got that way, yet everyone ignores
the causal mechanism.
Exactly. Everyone ignores that unless you have personal responsibility, like you were alluding to before. I actually do believe that every single person has to exercise personal responsibility with every single action that they do. And when you go to the supermarket, for example, and you buy a chop and go home and cook it up and eat it, you don't think about what went to killing that animal in order to eat that food, right? Whereas someone like me, I know very well. I lived on a farm. I've killed my own meat. I know exactly how it goes. It's not a pleasant experience by any stretch of the imagination. And if you haven't done it, there's very little I can explain to you about how deep and powerful those sorts of experiences...
Taking away another being's consciousness.
Yeah, exactly. It's not this easy thing.
I don't think there's any honor in killing something, because the military and the soldiers and everything are generally branded as honorable people.
They're peacekeepers. Of course they're honorable.
Yeah,
they've got peace right in the name, right?
But yet they kill people. And how could killing people be honorable?
Well, it's not. And this is why I think that the idea of morals is a bit... it's like a child trying to explain life, right? Oh, you've got these morals and you've got this God and you've got this soul and you mix them all together and, oh, look, you're a good person. And no, that's not what happens is, you see experiences and you live through experiences and then you know what experiences you don't want to have happen again. And you know the experiences that you do. And then you give the experiences that you want to have happen and you ignore the rest. That's what we're supposed to do as human animals, right? We're supposed to intermingle like that. And that is where I think we get our morality from.
So you're saying, if you had a good teacher as a child and they really influenced you, then you would teach someone else and it gives you the same sort of...
Precisely. I did, in fact, have a really good teacher. Probably why I liked maths and science so much in high school was because of this one teacher, Mr. Kasane. He actually pointed out specific things that other teachers weren't pointing out, that made more sense to me, that completed the picture for me, that other teachers could not do. And then he would give me that extra bit of time, one-on-one time, to, help me through things and help me understand things, until the point where I actually became second in the class. I started right at the bottom at the beginning of year 9, ended up second out of the class.
So, but you were in a way quite lucky then. So, isn't that kind of unfair to impose that kind of judgment on other people? Because
this is why Mr. Kassane did it, right? He's got 7 kids that all went through the exact same high school, and he taught them all himself maths and science, right? And he taught all the rest of his students in exactly the same way that he taught his own sons and daughters, right? This is exactly the way that we're supposed to be. It's self-preservation. I do good for me and mine, so why can't you do good for you and yours, right?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. What I wanted to bring up is, because we were talking earlier about personal responsibility, and I think it's a little bit unfair to look at personal responsibility outside the context of someone's environment, and if someone was a victim of their environment, then they're not as responsible, you could say. Yeah. Because they haven't had their eyes opened, metaphorically speaking.
On the face of it, I agree with that. There is a problem with that mentality, though. What's that term called? Affluenza. That's the one. Oh, my environment is so affluent, I can't go to jail.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying the more affluent you are, the more responsibility you should probably take.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, is people don't take responsibility. And when you start making affordances and allowances based on someone's upbringing, someone's environment, someone's family life, if you keep making affordances and allowances for that, that's why the cases like this, and these are real cases where people have done really serious things. They've stolen, they've hurt people, they've killed people, and they've not gone to jail because they're rich, and they've not gone to jail based on this affluenza. And it's an excuse based on their environment. Oh, they wouldn't do well in prison because they've been
I actually mean almost the opposite. I'm saying, like, someone who is poor and starving, I can understand why they might steal a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
Because they're poor and starving. They are on the last... If someone is a billionaire and they steal millions and millions of people's money through a Ponzi scheme or something, I hold that person more responsible because they didn't need to do it. They're not doing it for survival, they're doing it for greed.
I generally agree with you, but where exactly is that line that
I think it's a spectrum, like most things.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It is a spectrum, but where do you draw the line?
You don't draw a line because it's a spectrum.
Well... You've got to draw the line somewhere. And if you're going to have a rule of law, and if you've got those laws that apply to everyone...
The rule of law is a very strange thing to me. I don't know if it's logically consistent.
Well...
Because the rule of law, in my opinion, was created to protect private property. So if you didn't have private property, then you might not need the law anymore. And if you had an environment that supported people, you wouldn't have the level of aberrant behavior that we have now.
Yes and no. It is a fallacy that it was based on private property. The rule of law existed far longer than private property, and this is...
So you're saying the rule of law has been used to protect private property, but it wasn't created for...
That's right.
Okay, fair enough.
So when they say possession is 9/10 of the law, that's a fairly new modern phrase, and the reason why they can get away with that is because 9 out of 10 laws all are to do with private property.
Yeah.
If you remove all those laws, right, then you actually have what the rule of law was intended.
Yeah, well, I would totally agree with that. I'm saying, modern law is generally about private property.
The rule of law was established, far before Babylonian times, but the understanding is that the reason why the rule of law existed is because cities and states existed, and to be able to have a population that all got along and actually, prospered in some way, well, then you have to have some sort of laws. Most people have heard about, Nebuchadnezzar cutting the baby in half, right?
I haven't. What's that?
So 2 people are fighting over a baby, right? Both parents, right?
Oh, this is going to end badly.
Not one of them has more of a right than the other So what he said was, I'm going to cut the baby in half and you can both have half. And the person that actually stepped in and go, no, don't cut, let them have it. Well, that was the true parent. This is how he got it. And those sorts of things happened in front of people and at courts and showed people how well we were supposed to get along. And these rules and laws were put in place for our betterment.
Well, it's kind of like, that's more, to me, the origin of culture and traditions that were generally to make society more fluid.
Yeah. Well, basically, you just wanted to be able to get along.
That's what people generally want.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to be fighting over resources. You don't want to be, competing with each other over children, for example, or the love of someone, perhaps. Do you know what I mean? We're just all supposed to get along. We're supposed to...
You want that not to be an issue.
Yeah.
So you can get along with your life doing what you actually want to do.
Exactly. I'm not hurting anyone, leave me alone type mentality.
Yeah, which I don't think is necessarily what the law today promotes.
No. It's not what the law today promotes. The law has been usurped and intertwined with finance so much that it's hard to separate the two. Now every law, almost every law has a monetary cost or fine attached to it. It has, do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
It's very hard now for you to separate what is real law and what is not. But basically, what it comes down to is what's considered common law or natural law.
Do you want to explain that?
Common law and natural law is basically what we've just been saying, is just the basic principles that allow us to get along. Don't kill, don't steal, don't rape, don't
do all the things that the evolutionary game strategy would say not to do.
Exactly.
Cooperate if you can.
And then all else doesn't matter. If someone's doing some sort of behavior that you don't like, instead of placing a rule or a law on him, then just go away, do something else.
So what do you think about laws today that are like, you can't feed homeless people or something like that?
That is ridiculous.
But what if you gave them poisonous food?
It's ridiculous. I remember at school, I used to swap bits of my lunch with my friends for other things that I liked. None of us got the lunch that we wanted. But if you swap with everyone in the circle, right, you got what you wanted. You can't do that now because everything's, structured so that if anyone's
sanitized.
Well, that's the whole point. If anyone's got an allergy nut, no one in that school can take that in now. Do you know what I mean?
Really?
Yeah! Like, no, someone's allergic to peanut butter. You cannot take peanut butter sandwiches to school. Period.
Wow.
It's ridiculous.
I was not aware that was a thing. You think about a monetary influence behind that? Like jam or Vegemite companies kind of promoting nut allergies?
I try really hard to steer away from conspiracy theories.
I don't think that's a conspiracy. I think that's just a business decision like we were talking earlier. Just like assassinating someone who's your competitor is a business decision.
Logically, it's plausible, but I have yet to see evidence of it.
I haven't seen any evidence. I'm talking about the idea of it.
Yeah, the idea where it works. But, I don't think that's what's happening. I don't think they're fucking with my day just to, sell more jam.
Well, you'd be surprised what these companies would go up to. Like, the point I'm trying to make is that businesses will do anything and everything to better their financial position.
Yeah.